Pick up every coin! On your knees, now!
You want humiliation, not payment.
No, what he deserves is respect to the owner's guest. Step away from my counter.
Pick up every coin, the manager said, loud enough for the showroom to hear. Marcus Reed looked down at the polished concrete floor of Halcyon Commercial Supply, where $37 in quarters and dollar coins had rolled beneath display tables, shelving units, and the shoes of 3 waiting customers. He had placed the coins on the counter only because the cashier had asked whether he could cover the exact delivery surcharge. The manager, a narrow-faced man named Brent Calloway, had swept them off with the back of his hand before checking the invoice Marcus had brought. Marcus stood still in his charcoal work jacket, one hand resting on the leather portfolio that held the purchase authorization for his construction firm. His dark skin and close-cropped gray at the temples made him look older than 42 when he was tired, and he had been awake since 4 that morning reviewing a hospital renovation schedule. "You knocked them down," he said. "I need you to pick them up or call someone who will." Brent gave a thin laugh and glanced toward the front windows, where Marcus's pickup sat between 2 contractor vans. "You came in here arguing over a surcharge with loose change. I'm not getting one of my employees on the floor because you made a scene." He shifted his attention to the cashier, a young woman whose name tag read Elena. "Put the order on hold until he can produce a valid business account." Elena's fingers paused above the register. She had already scanned Marcus' account number from the authorization sheet, and the screen beside her showed a green confirmation bar. Marcus had seen it before Brent stepped behind the counter and turned the monitor away. Elena looked at the coins near her shoe, then at Brent, but said nothing. "My account is valid," Marcus said. "The order was approved yesterday. 6 pallets of copper fittings, 2 valve assemblies, and the sealed control units listed on page 3. Your warehouse confirmed the loading window for 9:15. The language changed Brent's expression for half a second. Most walk-in customers did not know that sealed control units had to be released from the secured cage or that missing a loading window could push a commercial order to the next business day. He recovered by tapping the portfolio with one finger. "Anyone can print paperwork. We have procedures for high-value purchases." Behind Marcus, a white contractor in paint-stained boots shifted his weight. He had entered after Marcus and had been waved toward the coffee station without being asked for identification. Marcus noticed the man looking from Brent to the scattered coins. Near the loading bay door, an older black woman in a Navy delivery uniform lowered the clipboard she had been reading. Neither person spoke, but both were watching now. Marcus opened the portfolio and placed his driver's license, company purchasing card, and the original order confirmation on the counter. The paper carried Halcyon's embossed seal and Elena's initials from the previous afternoon. "Here are 3 forms of verification. Check them. Then restore the loading slot." Brent did not touch any of them. "You're becoming confrontational." Marcus felt the old pressure gather behind his ribs, the one that when a simple request was rewritten into a threat. His father had taught him to count backward before answering men who confused restraint with permission. Marcus reached 7 before he spoke. "I have not raised my voice. I have not threatened anyone. I have asked you to verify an order your employee already verified." Elena glanced again at the hidden monitor. This time, she took a small receipt slip from the printer and folded it beneath her palm. Brent saw the movement and stepped closer to her station. "Cancel the release," he said. "Mark the account for manual review. That will miss the hospital shutdown window," Marcus said. The renovation crew had 6 hours that night to replace the failing valves before the surgical wing reopened. Delaying the materials would not embarrass him. It would leave 50 workers idle and force the hospital to reschedule procedures. Brent finally picked up Marcus's purchasing card, not to inspect it, but to hold it between 2 fingers as if it were dirty. "Then perhaps your company should have sent someone better prepared." The contractor near the coffee station took out his phone, though he kept it low against his thigh. The delivery driver moved closer to the counter and studied the order seal. Marcus saw recognition in her face, but before she could speak, Brent dropped the purchasing card beside the nearest coin and pointed toward the floor. "Clear up your mess and leave," he said. Then he turned to Elena. "Lock the account." Elena swallowed, pressed one key, and the green bar on the concealed screen changed to red. The red bar held on Elena's screen for less than a second before a warning box replaced it. "Account hold Repurs Supervisor Aufgefreischen." Brent leaned over her shoulder and entered his code. Marcus watched the cashier's face as the system accepted it. She did not look at Brent when she tore the narrow receipt from beneath her palm and slid it under the edge of the keyboard. The contractor by the coffee station had stopped pretending to check his phone. The delivery driver had moved close enough to read the first page of Marcus's order. "Your name is Marcus Reed?" she asked. Brent turned toward her. "Mom, this does not involve you." The woman lifted her clipboard. A Halcyon warehouse badge hung from the pocket of her navy shirt, worn pale around the edges. "It involves my loading schedule. I'm Denise Harper. I'm assigned to Bay 4, and this order was staged before I clocked in." She pointed to the seal on Marcus's paperwork. "That blue stamp means the secured cage release was signed yesterday. You don't stage those units without account clearance." Brent's jaw shifted. "Staging can be reversed." "It can," Denise said. "But not because somebody brought exact change." Marcus saw Elena press her lips together, trying not to react. He also saw Brent notice it. The manager reached past her and removed the receipt she had hidden, but before he could fold it, Marcus read the printed line at the top, "Account verify 8:57 a.m." Brent crumpled it in one hand. "You just destroyed part of the transaction record," Marcus said. "It's a duplicate slip. Then print another one." Brent dropped the paper into the waste bin. "We're done here." The contractor stepped away from the coffee station. "Actually, I saw the screen go green before you turned it." His name was stitched above his shirt pocket. "Dale, you let me charge $12,000 last month with a license and a company card. You didn't ask me to prove I belong to the company." Brent's tone softened for him. "Sir, you're misunderstanding the issue." "No," Dale said. "I think I'm understanding it late." That admission changed the room more than a speech would have. Marcus had expected denial, maybe discomfort. He had not expected the man to name his own delay. Brent looked toward the glass office at the rear of the showroom, calculating whether another manager might support him. Marcus knew that look. It was the moment when a bad decision searched for a larger desk to hide behind. Marcus bent once, not to gather the coins, but to retrieve his purchasing card. He left the quarters where they lay. "I need the order hold removed and the original loading time restored. I also want the account note preserved exactly as entered." Brent gave a humorless smile. "You don't dictate our internal records." "No, your retention policy does." Marcus tapped the footer of the order confirmation. "Commercial disputes tied to controlled inventory are preserved for 30 days. Your own language." Elena's eyes lifted. Brent's did not. He had not expected Marcus to read the fine print, and Marcus hated the small satisfaction he felt at seeing that surprise. It was too close to proving he deserved basic treatment because he happened to know the policy. He pushed the feeling aside. The policy mattered because Brent had used the system, not because Marcus had memorized it. Brent reached for the desk phone. "I'm calling security." Denise stepped between him and the loading bay door. She did not block his path, but she planted her boots where he would have to acknowledge her. "Call operations first. Bay 4 is occupied by an approved medical supply order, and you just froze it after staging. If security removes the customer without an operations review, the delay code lands on my route and Elena's transaction." For the first time, Brent hesitated. He had been willing to burden Marcus. He was less certain about creating a traceable operational failure tied to 2 employees. Elena moved before he decided. She pressed the print command twice. One receipt came from the register, another rolled from the small audit printer beneath the counter. She handed the first to Marcus and slipped the second into a clear transaction pouch used for daily reconciliations. "The verification timestamp is on both," she said. Her voice shook, but she kept going. "And the manual hold shows Mr. Calloway's supervisor code." Brent stared at her. "You are not authorized to distribute internal documentation." I'm authorized to provide the customer receipt, Elena said. The audit copy stays with reconciliation. Marcus read the paper. His account had been verified at 8:57. The hold had been entered at 9:04 under Brent's code, with the reason listed as suspected payment irregularity. Nothing on the receipt mentioned an invalid account, disruptive conduct, or incomplete identification. Brent picked up the phone anyway. Fine. We'll let regional operations sort it out. Denise checked the wall clock. They won't need to come from regional. Ms. Vale is already on site for the quarterly warehouse walk. Brent's hand stopped above the keypad. A door opened beyond the showroom, followed by the clipped echo of shoes crossing the loading corridor. Denise looked toward the sound, then at Marcus's order seal. The company owner, she said, just came through Bay 4. The woman who entered through the loading corridor did not look like anyone Brent had prepared to impress. She was in her late 50s, silver-threaded locks gathered at the nape of her neck, a canvas field coat over dark slacks, and safety glasses resting above her forehead. Two warehouse supervisors followed with tablets tucked beneath their arms. She paused when she saw the coins across the floor, then looked at Denise, Elena, Marcus, and finally Brent. Her gaze moved in the order of the disruption, not the order of rank. "Why is Bay 4 stalled?" she asked. Brent straightened and lowered the phone. "Miss Vale, we have a customer dispute involving questionable payment and increasingly aggressive behavior. I was about to have security remove him so we could resume normal operations." Nora Vale looked toward Marcus. He handed her the customer receipt without stepping closer. "My account cleared at 8:57. Mr. Calloway placed a manual hold 7 minutes later after knocking my exact payment from the counter and refusing to inspect the approved documents." Brent lifted one palm. "That is a highly selective version. It is also time-stamped," Elena said. Her voice came out thinner than before, but she did not take it back. Nora turned toward her, and Elena explained the green verification, the supervisor override, and the audit copy sealed for reconciliation. She kept to what she had seen. Marcus noticed that she did not mention the way Brent had looked at him, or the difference in tone he had used with Dale. She did not need to. The decision trail was already visible. Nora held out her hand to one of the warehouse supervisors. "Pull the Bay 4 release record. Do not modify the order status." Brent stepped nearer. "We should discuss this privately. There are conduct concerns the system will not show." Dale raised his phone. "It might show on this." Marcus looked at him. The contractor's screen displayed a recording that began with the coins already rolling. It had missed Brent sweeping them from the counter, but it captured the demand that Marcus pick them up, the refusal to reprint the verification slip, and the order to lock the account. It also caught Marcus speaking evenly throughout. Useful, but incomplete. Marcus knew better than to treat it as the whole truth. "I didn't get the beginning," Dale said, "but I got enough to show he wasn't threatening anybody." Nora did not reach for the phone. "Keep the original file. Don't edit or post it. Operations may request a copy with its metadata intact." Brent's face tightened. "Now we're preserving customer recordings based on a misunderstanding? We are preserving everything," Nora said. "That includes material that may support your explanation." The warehouse supervisor handed her the tablet. Nora read for several seconds, then turned it so Brent could see. The order had been approved the previous afternoon, staged at 6:42 that morning, and released from secured inventory under Marcus's commercial account. At 8:57, Elena had completed identity verification. At 9:04, Brent had entered a fraud-related hold without checking the account contact, calling commercial services, or documenting a mismatch. Nora looked at him over the top of the tablet. "What irregularity did you verify?" He arrived with loose coins and became resistant when asked to follow procedure. "The surcharge is $37, Marcus said. The cashier asked whether I had exact payment because the till was short on change." Elena nodded. "That's correct." Nora's attention returned to Brent. "And which procedure requires a verified commercial customer to collect money you knocked from the counter before receiving an approved order?" Brent's answer took too long. "That is not how it happened." Denise shifted her clipboard under one arm. Then the floor cameras can settle that part. Camera 6 covers the register and the Bay 4 door. The nearest supervisor tapped his screen, but his expression changed. Camera 6 is showing a maintenance interruption from 8:51 onward. Brent glanced toward the ceiling before he could stop himself. Marcus felt the significance of that movement, but it was not proof. A camera failure could be routine. An incomplete phone recording could be challenged. Even the transaction log established the hold, not why Brent had entered it. The truth had survived, but it was still scattered across systems controlled by the company. Nora handed the tablet back. Place a preservation hold on the register audit, access logs, camera maintenance record, and Bay 4 release history. Restore Mr. Reed's order under my authorization, but do not close the incident. Brent stepped forward. You're taking his side before hearing mine. I am stopping an operational delay unsupported by the record, Nora said. Your account of the conduct will be reviewed with everything else. The loading bay alarm gave 2 short tones. Denise checked the schedule and opened the secured door. Beyond it, Marcus could see his pallets wrapped and labeled exactly where they had been waiting all morning. Restoring the order should have felt like relief. Instead, he watched the supervisor open the camera maintenance log and saw a manual service entry created at 8:53 under a manager-level credential. The credential belonged to Brent Calloway. Marcus saw Brent recognize the credential at the same moment Nora did. The manager's face did not collapse. It tightened into something more careful. I opened a maintenance ticket because camera 6 had been flickering since yesterday, he said. The timing is unfortunate, but that is all it is. One of the warehouse supervisors, a broad-shouldered man named Luis, enlarged the service entry on his tablet. There's no technician assignment, no prior fault report, and no equipment code. It only says visual obstruction. He looked toward the ceiling camera. That usually means someone reported an object blocking the lens. Brent pointed toward the display banners suspended above the register. One of those may have shifted. Nora did not look up. Preserve the access log for the camera console and the original ticket metadata. Luis, verify the lens in person. Denise, continue the load. Mr. Reed's order leaves on schedule unless operations finds a safety issue unrelated to this dispute. The decision should have released the pressure in Marcus's chest. Instead, he pictured the hospital's facilities director checking the shutdown clock, then imagined the pallets arriving with no one there to receive them because he had spent too long trying to force Brent to admit what had happened. He had promised his crew he would be back before 10. He had also promised himself years earlier that he would stop walking away from mistreatment just because other people had made accountability expensive. His phone vibrated inside his jacket. 3 missed calls from his project superintendent, Isaiah Cole, followed by a message. Valve team is waiting. Tell me now if we need Plan B. Marcus stepped toward the loading bay threshold and called him. The materials are moving, he said. Denise is releasing them now. How late? Maybe 20 minutes. Isaiah exhaled into the receiver. Forklifts beeped behind his voice from the hospital dock. 20 minutes is survivable. 35 starts costing us the sterilization window. Marcus looked back at the showroom. Nora was questioning Elena. Brent stood close enough to hear, his posture rigid and wounded, as though the investigation itself were the insult. I may need to stay. No, Isaiah said. You need to get here. We can document what happened without turning you into the only person holding the job together. Marcus's first instinct was irritation. Isaiah had not seen the coins. He had not watched the verified account become suspicious because Brent needed a reason that sounded cleaner than contempt. This is my account, Marcus said. My order. My name on the hold. And 50 people are working under your name tonight, Isaiah replied. You told me not to build a company where every emergency still needs you standing in the middle of it. The words found their mark because Marcus had said them after a heart scare the previous winter, when his daughter had sat beside his hospital bed and asked whether Reed Mechanical would collapse if he took 1 week off. He had promised change. Since then, he had hired Isaiah, delegated procurement, and still found ways to become indispensable whenever fear offered him an excuse. Marcus lowered his voice. "Send Tasha to meet the truck. I'll arrive before the pressure test." "She is already there," Isaiah said, "because some of us listen when you delegate." A laugh escaped Marcus before he could stop it. It lasted only a second, but Elena glanced toward him, surprised by the sound. Even Nora's mouth softened. Brent looked offended that anyone could find room for humor. Luis returned from the register, carrying a lightweight promotional placard printed with Halcyon Spring discount. "This was clipped over the camera housing," he said. "The lens itself is fine." Denise frowned. "That sign belongs near the plumbing displays." Brent folded his arms. "Customers move displays all the time." "The clip was fastened from behind the mounting bracket," Luis said. "You need the stockroom ladder to reach it." Nora turned to Elena. "Who has access to that ladder?" "Managers, warehouse leads, and opening staff." Elena hesitated, then looked at Brent. "He used it this morning. He said the banner line looked uneven." Brent's voice sharpened. "Be very careful about what you imply." Elena flinched, and Marcus felt his anger surge faster than judgment. "Don't threaten her." Nora's eyes moved to him. The correction was calm but immediate. "Mr. Reed, let me handle employee protection." Marcus almost answered that someone should have handled it 7 minutes earlier. He stopped. Nora was right about the boundary, and anger had pushed him across it. "Understood," he said. "But please note the statement." "I already did." The loading door rattled upward. Denise guided the first pallet toward the dock while Dale gave Nora his contact information and agreed to retain the original video. Marcus gathered his portfolio and the customer receipt, leaving the coins where they had fallen. He had no intention of turning them into a symbol larger than the delay, the false hold, or Elena's fear. Nora approached before he could leave. "Your order is restored. The incident is not resolved. I'm placing Mr. Calloway off the floor pending an independent review of the transaction and camera access." Brent stared at her. "You're suspending me over coins?" "No," Nora said. "I'm removing you from duty because you entered a fraud hold without a documented basis, discarded a transaction slip, and may have interfered with a camera covering the dispute." Marcus looked toward Elena. She was sealing the audit copy with trembling hands. The company owner's arrival had stopped the order from disappearing. It had not yet answered whether the system would protect the person who preserved the record. As Marcus followed Denise toward Bay 4, Elena's supervisor login flashed on the register screen. Someone had just submitted a request to revoke her access. Marcus stopped at the threshold of Bay 4. The first pallet was already rolling toward the dock, its plastic wrap ticking against the metal uprights as Denise steered the pallet jack around the yellow floor line. Behind him, Elena stared at the register screen. The access revocation request had been entered under an administrative account, not Brent's personal login, but the timestamp was 9/19, less than 2 minutes after Nora removed him from the floor. "Don't touch it," Nora said. Elena lifted both hands from the keyboard. Luis photographed the screen with a company tablet, then opened the access control panel from his own device. "Request is pending," he said. "It hasn't executed." "Who can submit one?" Marcus asked, then caught himself. Nora had already reminded him where her authority began. He stepped back. "I'm asking because she preserved my transaction." Nora nodded once. "Store manager, regional operations, loss prevention, or system administration." Brent's floor credentials were suspended, but his office session may still be active. She looked toward the glass office. The door stood ajar, and the desktop monitor inside had gone dark. Brent's voice came from the customer side of the counter. "This is getting absurd. I submitted nothing against Elena." Nora did not answer him. "Luis, disable all active sessions tied to this location. Preserve the session history before you do. Elena, stay with Denise until we confirm your access and schedule. You will not be questioned alone." Elena's shoulders loosened by a fraction. Brent noticed. "I have managed this store for 11 years, he said. "You are treating routine supervision like retaliation because a customer arrived ready to accuse us of bias." Marcus felt the old urge to answer every distortion. He could have named the difference between an accusation and a verified hold, between supervision and removing an employee's access after she preserved a receipt. Instead, he looked toward the loading dock, where the second pallet waited behind the first. Isaiah had been right. The job could not become collateral for the argument. "I need to leave with the truck," Marcus said to Nora, "but I want written confirmation that the account note, camera ticket, transaction audit, and access request are under preservation." "You'll have it before the truck clears the gate," she said. Brent laughed without humor. "You're giving him internal assurances before we know whether his conduct violated policy." Nora finally turned to him. "We know the account was valid. We know the hold lacked a documented mismatch. We know a transaction slip was discarded. We know the camera view was obstructed by a sign placed with equipment not available to customers. We know an access revocation request followed the cashier's decision to preserve the audit copy. Those facts do not decide every question. They decide whether this requires independent review. The distinction settled over the showroom. It was not the dramatic confession Brent seemed to fear, and it was not the instant vindication Marcus had once imagined men like him receiving when the right person arrived. It was narrower and stronger, enough verified facts to force the process forward. Luis raised his tablet. "I have the session source. The revocation request came from the manager's office terminal at 9:18. The user field shows administrative override, but the badge tap that unlocked the office at 9:16 belongs to Brent Calloway." Brent looked toward the glass office. "My badge was on the counter." Elena shook her head before anyone asked. "No, it was clipped to your belt when you came behind my register. That proves nothing about who entered the office." Denise set the pallet jack handle upright. "The corridor camera covers the office door." Luis checked, then frowned. "That camera is working." He opened the feed. The video had no audio, but the sequence was clear. After Nora arrived, Brent crossed behind the showroom displays, entered the office, and returned less than a minute later. No one else approached the door. The revocation request appeared on the system 30 seconds after he came back to the counter. Brent's face lost its carefulness. "I was protecting the integrity of the investigation." Elena had distributed documentation without approval. Nora's expression hardened. "You said you submitted nothing." "I meant I did not retaliate." Marcus watched the words collapse under their own weight. Brent had been offered more than one chance to correct the record. Each time he had chosen a cleaner-sounding version until the systems contradicted him. Nora handed Luis the tablet. "Convert Mr. Calloway's removal from floor duty to suspension pending independent investigation. Notify regional HR and outside compliance counsel. Include the false statement he just made and the access request against Elena." Brent stared at her. "You're suspending me in front of customers." "No," Nora said. "Your decisions brought the review into public view. The suspension is an administrative step, not a final finding." Denise resumed moving the second pallet. Marcus followed her toward the dock, where morning heat pushed through the open bay door and softened the adhesive on the shipping labels. Before he climbed into his truck, Nora handed him a signed preservation notice and a restored release receipt. At the bottom, beneath the order number, a new line had appeared. "Additional transactions flagged for comparison." Marcus read it twice. His case had forced the door open. What waited behind it was no longer only about $37 or one loading slot. The restored order cleared Halcyon's gate at 9:31, with Denise driving the company truck and Marcus following in his pickup. The coins remained on the showroom floor behind them. He had expected leaving to feel like surrender, but the preservation notice lay on the passenger seat beside the release receipt, both signed and time-stamped. The materials were moving. Elena's audit copy was protected. Brent's access trail had survived long enough to be read. At the hospital dock, Isaiah stood beneath the concrete overhang wearing a hard hat and the expression he reserved for delays that had become personal. He checked the labels as Denise lowered the first pallet. "Control units are sealed. Valve assemblies match the purchase order." Then he looked at Marcus. "You all right?" "I'm here." That wasn't the question. Marcus took the receiving clipboard from Denise and signed beside the arrival time. He could still hear Brent telling him to collect the coins, but the loading dock demanded smaller decisions. Which pallet went to the mechanical room first, whether the corridor clearance could handle the longer crate, how many minutes remained before sterilization began. Ask me after the pressure test. Isaiah accepted that answer without pretending it was complete. He directed 2 crew members toward the freight elevator, then handed Marcus a paper cup of coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard and sugar. The ordinary badness of it steadied him. For the next hour they worked inside the hospital's lower mechanical level, where warm pipes clicked behind insulated jackets and the air carried the faint metallic smell of treated water. The first valve seated cleanly. The second did not. A flange had shifted during transport, leaving the bolt pattern a fraction out of alignment. Marcus crouched beside the assembly, measured twice, and felt the remaining schedule tighten around them. Under normal conditions, he would have taken over. Instead, he asked Tasha, the Site 4 woman, what she saw. "The crate brace pushed it during loading," she said. "We can reset it without breaking the seal, but I need 20 minutes and both riggers. You have 15. "I have 20, she replied. "Or you have a damaged valve and a report explaining why you rushed me." Marcus almost argued. Then he heard his own lesson returned in her voice. Pressure did not create authority. It revealed whether people respected its limits. "Take 20, he said. "Isaiah, adjust the sterilization sequence." His phone rang as they moved the rigging points. Nora Vale's name appeared on the screen. Marcus stepped into the service corridor, where a red indicator blinked above the fire door. "We have begun the comparison review," Nora said. "I need your consent before your transaction is shared with outside compliance counsel beyond the facts necessary to preserve it. You have it for the investigation. There is another issue. Your account was not the first commercial account Mr. Calloway flagged under payment irregularity. We found 8 holds in 14 months with similar language." Marcus looked through the narrow door window at his crew. Similar how? Verified accounts, walk-in pickups. Manual fraud holds entered after identity checks cleared. 4 customers abandoned their orders. 2 paid additional deposits to have the holds removed. The number settled heavily because it was not enormous. 8 people could be dismissed as exceptions, each one isolated enough to doubt their own reading of the encounter. Do the records identify race? No. Account data does not collect it. Then you cannot claim a pattern of racial discrimination from the holds alone. "I know," Nora said. "That is why I'm not claiming it. We are comparing transaction notes, appeal outcomes, employee schedules, and customer communications. Outside counsel will contact the affected customers independently." Marcus appreciated the restraint, though part of him wanted certainty faster. "And Elena? Her access remains active. She has been moved temporarily to reconciliation with full pay and no loss of hours. She asked not to work under Brent's assistant manager while the review is open. That sounds like she is the one being moved." There was a pause. She raised the same concern. "We are arranging for the assistant manager to report elsewhere instead. I should have recognized the burden before proposing it." The admission did not erase the mistake, but it changed what Nora did next. Marcus heard keyboard taps on her end. "The revised instruction is being sent now," she said. "Elena stays in her position unless she chooses otherwise." A metal knock sounded from the mechanical room. Tasha had reset the flange and was signaling for inspection. Marcus told Nora he had to return to the test. Before ending the call, she added one more fact. The camera obstruction had occurred on 3 previous mornings when manual fraud holds were entered at the same register. Marcus slipped the phone into his jacket and walked back beneath the pipes. The pressure gauge climbed as Isaiah opened the test line, its needle moving past 50, 60, then 70 pounds without a tremor. The valve held. His order had arrived in time. Across town, the company had begun testing something harder. Whether the same system that had recorded Brent's decisions had also taught everyone else not to question them. The independent review opened 4 days later in Halcyon's distribution office, not in the showroom where Brent had expected to control the story. Nora had converted a training room beside the warehouse into a hearing space, with the blinds raised toward Bay 4 and the freight lanes visible beyond the glass. Marcus arrived after his hospital shift change, carrying only the preservation notice and the original receipt. He had declined Nora's offer to send questions in advance. Brent sat at the far end of the table with an employment attorney and a regional director named Colin Mercer. Elena occupied a chair near the door with her own representative from Halcyon's Employee Assistance Council. Denise and Dale waited outside until called. Luis stood beside a monitor connected to 3 separate data systems. No one had been invited to give a speech. Nora began by asking Luis to reconstruct Marcus's transaction from the warehouse release, register audit, and access logs. The order had cleared commercial review the previous afternoon. Secured inventory had been staged before opening. Elena verified Marcus's identity at 8:57. Brent entered the manual hold at 9:04 without contacting commercial services or documenting a discrepancy. At 9:16, after Elena preserved the audit copy, Brent entered the manager's office. The request to revoke her access followed 2 minutes later. Colin interrupted. "The timing is concerning, but we should avoid assuming intent. Managers are permitted to place temporary holds when behavior or payment circumstances raise risk." Marcus watched Brent settle back in his chair. That was the surface explanation the company had repeated in 6 of the 8 comparison cases: discretion, customer behavior, payment risk. Each phrase sounded reasonable until placed beside the steps the managers had skipped. "Show the required sequence," Nora said. Luis opened Halcyon's commercial fraud protocol. A hold after successful identity verification required one of 3 conditions: a mismatch in account ownership, a warning from the payment processor, or confirmation from commercial services that the purchaser lacked authority. Brent had documented none. In 5 comparison cases, the same required checks had also been omitted. In 4, the customer notes used nearly identical descriptions: resistant, unusually insistent, unwilling to cooperate with verification. Elena's counsel asked who had written those notes. "Brent wrote 6, Luis said. His assistant manager wrote 2 after consulting him." Brent leaned forward. "Those customers behaved similarly. Similar conduct produces similar documentation." Nora brought Denise into the room. She described seeing approved orders staged, then delayed after the customers arrived. She remembered 3 of them because the holds disrupted her routes. 2 were black contractors she had recognized from previous pickups. One was a Latino restaurant owner whose account had been active for 9 years. Denise had not witnessed every exchange, and she said so. What she had witnessed was the operational pattern: clearance before arrival, suspicion after face-to-face contact, then pressure to pay deposits or leave. Dale followed with the original video from his phone. The file metadata confirmed when and where it had been recorded. It did not show Brent knocking down the coins, but it captured him telling Marcus to collect them, refusing to reprint the verification slip, and describing Marcus as confrontational while Marcus's voice remained level. Colin asked whether the missing beginning made the recording unreliable. "It makes it incomplete," Marcus said, "not useless." Nora nodded to Luis. The monitor changed to the corridor footage. Brent appeared carrying the stockroom ladder at 8:51. He positioned the promotional placard over camera 6, returned the ladder, and entered the maintenance ticket at 8:53. 40 minutes of footage from a secondary aisle camera showed the entire sequence from a distance, including Brent sweeping the coins from the counter. The camera had not been discovered during the initial review because it belonged to warehouse safety, not showroom security. Brent's attorney requested a pause. Brent ignored him. "I covered camera 6 because Elena complained about customers filming her register. I was trying to protect staff privacy." Elena looked at him. "I never complained. You said the angle made you uncomfortable." "I said the new banner blocked my view of the loading door." The room held the contradiction without Nora explaining it. Brent had been given the chance to describe a mistaken judgment, a poorly documented hold, even a misguided privacy decision. Instead, every new record forced him into another version. Marcus placed the receipt on the table. "Restoring my order fixed one delay. It did not fix a system where verified customers could be marked suspicious without the required checks, then charged more to escape the hold. I want those deposits returned. Every affected account corrected, Elena protected from retaliation, and the manual hold process changed so one store manager cannot override verification alone. Colin looked toward Nora. Those remedies exceed this individual complaint. They do, Nora said, because the verified conduct exceeds it. She announced an immediate freeze on discretionary commercial holds at the location, independent contact with all 8 affected customers, reimbursement reviews for added deposits and delay costs, and external oversight of the broader pattern. Brent would remain suspended while the board's employment committee reviewed termination and supervisory responsibility. His assistant manager would be removed from commercial transactions pending a separate inquiry. Then Luis opened the final comparison file. One customer had lost a municipal renovation contract after Halcyon delayed his materials and documented him as a suspected fraud risk. The city had relied on that note when rejecting his appeal. Nora looked at Marcus before turning back to the board representative. The store decision did not remain inside this building. We now have to determine how far the false record traveled. The city record had traveled farther than anyone in the room expected. Luis opened a chain of forwarded documents showing that Halcyon's fraud note had been attached to a contractor performance review, then copied into a municipal procurement file. The original customer, a black electrical contractor named Raymond Bell, had challenged the delay at the time, but the city had treated Halcyon's notation as an independent warning. His appeal was denied before he ever saw the language used against him. Colin removed his glasses and read the screen again. "We cannot correct a municipal decision ourselves." "No," Nora said. "But we can issue a formal retraction, identify who received the false note, and provide the underlying audit trail. The city decides what happens next." Marcus appreciated the boundary. It would have been easy for Nora to promise that Raymond would regain the contract by afternoon. Instead, she authorized outside counsel to contact him, preserve his right to respond, and notify every recipient that Halcyon no longer supported the fraud designation. She also ordered a review of whether any employee had shared internal suspicion notes beyond approved channels. Brent's attorney asked for a private consultation. This time, Brent went with him. The two disappeared into the corridor while the committee remained in session. Through the glass, Marcus watched warehouse staff move pallet after pallet beneath the numbered bay lights. The work did not pause because one manager had been suspended. That mattered. Accountability could remove a person without pretending the whole operation depended on him. When Brent returned, his posture had changed. He no longer looked offended. He looked tired. "I am willing to acknowledge documentation failures," he said, "but I reject the claim that I targeted anyone based on race." Nora folded her hands. "This review is not asking you to confess to a belief we cannot measure. It is assessing what you did, which customers bore the burden, which rules you bypassed, and whether you retaliated against an employee who preserved the record." Brent's attorney placed a hand near his notes, warning him not to answer too quickly. Brent ignored it again. "I used judgment. Some customers create more risk than others." "Based on what?" Elena asked. The question was quiet, almost reluctant. Brent looked at her and found no safe answer. The transaction logs showed verified accounts. The videos showed who received extra scrutiny. The customer notes showed the same coded descriptions repeating after face-to-face contact. Intent remained disputed. The pattern of decisions did not. Nora announced the employment committee's interim ruling before the session ended. Brent's suspension would continue through final review. His assistant manager was removed from commercial approvals. Elena's schedule, pay, and system access were protected by written order, and any future action involving her required regional authorization. The company would refund improper deposits immediately, review documented delay losses, and issue corrections to all affected accounts. Marcus listened for the part that usually disappeared beneath corporate language, how the process itself would change. Nora did not leave it vague. Halcyon would require two-person approval for commercial fraud holds after identity verification, automatic notice to account holders, a written reason code tied to a specific mismatch, and a human appeal path outside the store. Camera maintenance affecting transaction areas would require a second credential and generate an alert to regional security. These measures begin this week, Nora said. Compliance will test them for 90 days and publish the findings to the board. Colin looked toward Marcus. Your company will also receive reimbursement for the delivery surcharge and any verified labor costs caused by the delay. Marcus thought of the hospital crew, the shifted sterilization sequence, and Tasha refusing to rush a damaged flange. Submit the payment to Reed Mechanical, he said, but list the cause accurately, not customer dispute. Unsupported manual hold. Colin wrote it down. 2 weeks later, Nora called with the final employment decision. Brent had been terminated for repeated policy violations, falsification of transaction risk, interference with monitoring equipment, retaliation against Elena, and false statements during review. The assistant manager received a suspension and lost supervisory authority after the investigation found that he had copied Brent's language into 2 account notes without conducting required checks. The decision did not return Raymond Bell's city contract. Halcyon's retraction reopened his appeal, but the city scheduled a separate hearing 6 weeks away. Marcus understood the frustration of that delay. A false note could cross systems in minutes. Repair had to pass through every door it had touched. At Halcyon, the first visible change appeared at Elena's register. A new screen now required managers to identify the exact mismatch before placing a hold, and the override field would not open without a second approver. Beside the monitor sat a shallow ceramic tray for cash payments. On its first morning there, Marcus placed $37 in coins inside it and watched Elena count them without looking over her shoulder. 6 weeks after the hearing, Marcus returned to Halcyon for a reason that had nothing to do with his own account. Raymond Bell stood beside him at Elena's register, holding a municipal notice in one hand and the corrected Halcyon file in the other. The city had reversed the fraud designation, restored his eligibility to bid, and reimbursed the appeal fee. It could not return the renovation contract he had lost, but it had reopened 2 upcoming projects and removed the notation from his performance history. Raymond read the final paragraph twice before folding the letter along its original crease. They wrote administrative reliance on inaccurate third-party information, he said. That is a long way to travel to avoid saying they believed the wrong person. Marcus glanced toward the ceramic coin tray. It is still farther than they were willing to go 6 weeks ago. Raymond gave him a tired smile. He was 51, broad through the shoulders, with electrician's tape wrapped around one thumb from a job that morning. Outside the showroom windows, his service van carried the faded outline of a city contractor decal he had removed after losing the appeal. Nora says the new bid opens Monday. I have the crew. I have the bond. I don't know whether I have the stomach to walk back into that building. You do not owe them courage on demand, Marcus said. Submit when you are ready. Or don't. Getting your record corrected does not obligate you to keep doing business with people who made you fight for it. That was the answer Marcus had needed to hear himself. Halcyon had offered Reed Mechanical a preferred account contract after completing its review, along with reduced pricing and a direct commercial contact. Marcus accepted the reimbursement for the hospital delay, but he declined the preferred status. His company would purchase from Halcyon only when the terms and inventory made sense, not as proof that the relationship had healed. Nora joined them near the counter carrying the 90-day compliance report. The changes had produced fewer fraud holds, not more losses. Every post-verification hold now required 2 approvals, and 3 had been rejected because the stated mismatch did not match the account record. No cameras had gone offline without a regional alert. Elena had been promoted to commercial reconciliation after applying for the role herself, with a pay increase and authority to challenge unsupported hold requests. I want you both to see this before the board publishes it, Nora said. Not for approval, for accuracy. The report named the failures plainly: unchecked discretion, copied language, weak appeal routes, retaliation risk, and a culture that treated operational convenience as evidence. It also listed the limits of the review. Halcyon could identify disparate outcomes from the comparison cases, but its historical account system had not collected enough data to measure the full scope. Nora had commissioned an external audit rather than pretending the missing information proved there were no other cases. Raymond tapped one line with his wrapped thumb. "You kept the part about not knowing. We caused harm, partly by acting certain without checking," Nora said. "I was not going to repair that with another convenient certainty." Later that afternoon, Marcus drove to the hospital renovation site for the final inspection. The surgical wing had reopened on schedule, and the new valves held pressure through every test. Tasha handed him the completion sheet, then pointed to the empty signature line he usually filled himself. "Isaiah signed the last 3, she said. "You planning to trust the system you built, or should I find you a pen?" Marcus laughed and handed the sheet back. "Let him sign this one, too." The decision felt smaller than the confrontation at Halcyon, but it cost him something real. For years, being indispensable had protected him from the fear that one mistake could erase everything he had built. Now he was learning that a company became stronger when the truth did not depend on one person staying in every room. That evening, he stopped at Halcyon on his way home. The showroom was nearly empty. Elena was closing her register, and the ceramic tray sat beside her monitor with a few quarters and dollar coins inside. Marcus added one coin from his pocket, not as payment, but because it had been lodged beneath the seat of his truck since the morning of the incident. Elena looked at it, then at him. "That the last one?" "The last one from that floor." She placed it with the others and closed the drawer. Behind her, a new customer entered, carrying an account dispute from another Halcyon branch. Elena listened, opened the appeal screen, and asked for the transaction number before making any judgment about the person standing in front of her. Marcus watched long enough to see the record load. Then he left the coins where they belonged and walked out beneath the steady light of Bay 4.